Hello, okay, so today I'm going to show you how I did this simple mountain landscape painting just in my sketchbook. And I used acrylic paint for this, and the colours that I've used are Paynes grey and Cobalt blue. You could also try this painting using watercolour paints. Okay, so let's get started. I've got my sketchbook here and I'm just going to tape off a rectangle so that the painting has a neat edge at the end. Okay, so the supplies you need in case you want to give this kind of painting a go is a piece of thick paper or a good quality sketchbook, some tape, your acrylic paint, or you can use watercolour paint, a mixing palette and 2 glasses of water, as well as a brush, a large brush, a flat brush or a round brush would do. You could have a few on hand to experiment. Okay, so I'm going to get started now, and I've got a very watered down paint on my brush for the very background mountains, and I'm just holding the brush quite loosely towards the end because I want to give a kind of natural feel to this mountain, and I just literally drawn it on and I'm filling in the shape there. And as I mentioned before, I have mixed my Paynes grey with my Cobalt blue to get this kind of dark blue that I like, but you can experiment with different types of blue, or even other colours like browns work well, or just a black you could even try. Okay, so for the next layer I'm going to use paint that's got a little bit less water in, which will give a higher pigment content, so that's going to appear a bit darker than this very distant mountain. So I'm mixing up my paint now, making sure that it's really well mixed with the water. And I've got a piece of paper here you can just see. It's just a scrap piece, and I'm just making sure that I'm happy with the shade of that colour. Okay, so on it goes, and I'm holding my brush fairly near the end, and I'm just putting like a kind of jaggedy line just to give the impression of some kind of like mountains or hills, drawing in the shape, and then just going to paint in the rest of that all the way down to the bottom. Okay, and that's it. I need to wait for this layer to dry as well. And then sometimes what I do, depending on how the paint has gone on, is I kind of pick up the piece of paper or the sketchbook to just help that paint move around. You know, if it doesn't seem very evenly spread, you can use the effect of gravity to sort of make the paint move further down, or even sometimes you get these wrinkles in the paper and you can change the position of that wrinkle by sort of bending the paper a little bit. So that's what I'm doing here. Okay, so that layer is dried now, and it's going to be time to get the next layer on. And I'm doing exactly the same thing. I'm just adding a little bit less water to the paint to get a even darker shade. And I'm going to just use my test paper to make sure that I'm happy with that shade. Okay, so I'm doing exactly the same thing. I'm holding the brush fairly near the end, and I'm just going to put another jaggedy line in front of that second mountain, and I'm giving it a little bit, it looks a bit flatter now, as to give the idea that the land is kind of flattening out, and I'm just filling that colour in again as I did with the other. Okay, so now what I'm doing is I've got the end of a paintbrush here, and I'm just drawing a few lines across this section, because as you get closer to the foreground of the painting, you would see more detail. And it's not specific what this is, but it's just sometimes adding a bit of texture to the foreground can make the painting look a bit more interesting and add a bit more depth to it. Okay, so this is dry now, and what I'm going to do with a different kind of brush now, I'm using a round brush, I'm going to add in another layer, even darker paint, so that's got even less water mixed in with it, and I'm going to kind of make this layer look a bit more like trees or something like that. And as you can see again, I'm making the edge quite jaggedy. And because I'm using acrylic paint, I would say even more so than watercolour paint, because I've got less water in this layer, it's given this kind of texture which actually is really nice for this layer where I'm trying to give the impression of trees or something like that. It just adds a bit more interest to the painting. Okay, so I'm happy with the shape of those trees now, but I think before this dries I'm going to get the end of that paintbrush again and just put some lines across the front of here. And actually I quite like that effect because the inspiration for this came from driving through some mountains, and those lines kind of make it look as if the foreground is moving a bit, as it does if you're in a car looking out of the window. Okay, so now I need to wait for this layer to dry, and I'm getting happy with this painting, but I think it needs even more contrast, so I'm going to add another layer of trees in front of this layer when this is dried. Okay, so here we go, ready for the final layer now. I'm just mixing up my paint with really not very much water in it at all. And I'm just going to add that final layer of trees in. And here I'm just going to speed the video up a little bit. Okay, so now this is all dry and it's time to take the tape off. Okay, so this is probably the most fun bit of a painting like this, is when you get to take the tape off. And as you can see, it's really helped this picture to have that defined line. A bit of paint has gone under the tape on the right, but that's not a huge problem because this is just a sketchbook painting. And also I can go over that in some white paint just to make it look a bit more neat. Okay, so that's what I'm doing here. I'm just putting a bit of white paint over that bit there. Okay, so that's it. This painting is finished and I'm just putting my signature there. I hope that you've enjoyed this tutorial and that it's been useful. And if you liked the video, then please hit like. And if you want to see similar videos in the future, then please subscribe to my channel. Okay, thank you. Bye.